Thanks for pressing play. You're listening to the Broady Windsor Group on Real Estate, the podcast for homeowners seeking guidance and support on everything related to owning a home. This includes much more than just buying or selling. We've got you covered for everything from mortgages and financing to home maintenance tips, renovation and design advice, and of course, the latest insights and analysis on what's happening in our local communities. Welcome to the BW Group Podcast, and I've got a special guest with me today, my brother Sean, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this discussion with you, Sean, because we've had quite a few discussions over the years, and we were chatting about it the other day and thought this would be a really good topic to share with our audience, which is your real estate journey as a homeowner, investor, since first getting your real estate license 24 years ago. And I know that because it was the same year that I got married.
Yep.
So without further ado, I'd like to jump in and ask you sort of how you got started all the way from when you first bought your first property, and you've owned 9 properties in the last 22 years. So maybe share with us why you went down that route of owning so many properties and what the whole strategy was.
Sure. Yeah, it's good to be back. Took a little hiatus this summer from the podcast, so it's good to get back and discuss this. And it's funny we're talking about this particular topic today because I've been having these conversations with some clients recently. I had some clients of mine reach out, and their daughters were looking to get into the real estate market as investors, didn't own any property, so would be first-time home buyers. And so I shared my journey with them about my philosophy around real estate. And I know very well that my philosophy around my personal home is very different from a lot of people. So I'll just share the way I've always viewed it. And that may work for some people, and it may not be what other people want to do. Or, prime example, you and Natalie, your wife, you guys took a very different approach in how you viewed your principal residence, your family home. So I guess let's go back to the beginning. My first home, this will shock buyers today. I bought my first little detached 2-bedroom bungalow in St. Anne de Bellevue North. That's just west of Timberley on Tremblay Street for $116,000 in 2001. It might have been 2002. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to go back and look. And how did I do that? Well, I got a little down payment gift from mom and dad that helped with my down payment. And I was buying the property with my girlfriend at the time. So the two of us were able to combine a small down payment and buy that first home. And immediately we loved the location, we loved the house, but I think both of us being in real estate, she was also a real estate broker, both of us decided that it would be a stepping stone, and that we thought that we would attempt at climbing the property ladder, if you will. And so that was property number 1. We lived there for, I think it was 2 years. We did some pretty inexpensive fix-ups to the house, more cosmetic stuff, nothing major. We did benefit from a very good market around those years, and that has continued, thankfully for me, over the last 24. The real estate market in the West Island and Montreal as a whole has been phenomenal.
Yeah, your timing was probably excellent in terms of the last 22 years.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Timing was excellent. I think if you look now at where the Canadian real estate market is, I think we're heading into another, there'll be dips, but I think that's going to continue because there just isn't enough real estate to satisfy the amount of buyers that want to buy real estate. So supply and demand, right? So anyway, back to the first house. We lived in it a couple of years. We benefited from market appreciation. We also did improve the property from a cosmetic standpoint. We purchased something that didn't need a ton of major work. The house was built in the early 80s, so it was dated, but the previous owners had maintained it well. So I think looking back, that has always been something that has been important to me when looking at a property. I never really wanted to take on a money pit where you had to start doing major remedial work. And I advise my clients the same. Even clients of mine who have turned it into a business have become home rehabbers or flippers. You always want to look at something where the owner has maintained the property. So house number 1 did well, sold that one, made a small profit, and then bought a second property.
So how did you know when was the right time to sell and how much to invest in it? Because again, you were starting off, you're in a good neighborhood. So that's another question is like, how long should you keep it for and how much should you invest in it? Because I know you said you were looking for homes with good bones that were well maintained, that didn't need a ton of, major work. What else did you look at and how were you?
Well, I think we were fortunate to be in the business, so we were able to keep our eye on what was happening in the market. So we looked at wanting to time the market as best we could. You never can time the market, but we would typically sell the property in the spring market, which was a busier time, particularly if we had done some work on the exterior and improved the curb appeal, which we had done. And consequently, we always bought in a less busy time of year. I think I looked back at all of the resale properties that I purchased were all purchased approaching late fall as winter was approaching. And I think I sort of happened upon that formula, if you will, by chance. I don't think I had designed that strategy as a young person, and certainly it was something that I sort of learned through experience.
I guess as a broker too, and going through negotiations with clients, you saw that in certain situations, and if you mentioned this before, doing homework on the seller situation was a big part of, getting that home for, a better price than you otherwise would have.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to sort of the strategy that I came to develop around my personal residence. And I should mention, I think that the fact that the principal residence for Canadians is exempt from taxes. If you live in the house, the rule now is 2 years. If the CRA or Revenue Quebec feels that you're doing it as a business, I think it's important to let everybody know you can be hit with tax and not just capital gain, but income. So caveat there. But if you're living in them legit and you're staying in them for a period of time, there's nothing wrong with climbing the property ladder as I had done. And I came to realize that I thought the best time for me to find the best deals was always homes that were on the market for a while, probably had suffered from 1, 2, or 3 price reductions. So generally those are properties that were overpriced in the beginning. Vacant. I remember buying a couple of them that the owners had actually moved out. So the property was not showing at its best. They'd reduced the price a few times, and you kind of start to realize there might be an opportunity here. I always tell clients, and this has been something that I've always stuck to, is the profit in terms of buying real estate. You make your money on the purchase, much more so than the sale. If you can buy something at a great price, put some work into it, improve the way it shows. Again, if I could get away with just doing cosmetic renovations, paint, sand floors, get some elbow grease in there, fix up overgrown landscaping and gardens, and then buy it at a great price. So that's where negotiation comes in and doing your homework. I would see these properties as a broker all the time. You've seen it sit on the market for months. We see it with our clients. And this is why we always caution our sellers. The worst thing you can do is overprice a property and burn it and have it sit there for months, because then you get guys that are looking at it as this could be a possible opportunity.
Right. And you mentioned putting a little bit of elbow grease, and when you were at that age and had a little bit more energy, and you bought your own tools and you watched a lot of YouTube videos, and you were able to save a lot of money, because again, going out and hiring contractors today, that could significantly eat into that.
Yeah,
profit.
Absolutely. And it was a progression, right? Like the first one, we painted ourselves. I got a compound miter saw and a nail gun, and I did new casings and moldings around the door, and picked up something that looked dated, and through doing paint and decor made it look much nicer. And we weren't making huge profits here. These were like, for us, making $10,000-$20,000 was a big deal back then. Yeah. And then you roll it up, and then this is 24 years and moving every few years. Most properties I would stay 2 to 3 years. I think you and I looked at the average, 9 properties over 24 years, on average moving every 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Some I stayed 2-3 years. Some I stayed 5 or 6. It depended on the situation and my energy level of whether I wanted to get back in and do another renovation project. And then as I got more experienced with it, I took on bigger renovations. So maybe do a full kitchen, do a full bathroom, hire a contractor, complete basement. Like there was one I had, my little bungalow in Beaconsfield was a complete redo. Again, bought it at a great price, but I did everything on that one. I did the French drain, the full basement, did the kitchen, the bathrooms, took out walls. Thankfully, it had some things system-wise that were still good. The furnace was okay. The roof was okay. The windows had been replaced. So again, back to sort of properties that appealed to me were homes that typically had those big ticket items already done by the owner, previous owner.
Right.
And generally those were homes that were owned by seniors for the most part, where they'd really looked after it. So, they reshingled the roof, they changed all the windows and exterior doors. They had changed the furnace, the air conditioner or heat pump. They'd maybe redone the driveway. They had a decent yard and fence. So you would go in there and say, okay, well, what needs to be done to bring this house up to today's standard? And as I mentioned, it was generally, it could be as little as paint and moldings, sanding floors. It could be a kitchen and bathroom.
Backsplashes, counters.
Yeah. And so I think just over the years, starting to get experience on what sells, what buyers are looking for. We advise our clients on this all the time now. And somebody that's thinking of taking on a fixer-upper, have a good building inspection, make sure you know what you're getting into, and time of year. If you've got the flexibility to do this while you're young, like I did, and I was able to, and again, there's pain. There's pain.
Family situation.
Like I was a single father. I had my daughter part-time. I was able to do my real estate business, and then evenings and weekends spend a little time working on the house. And then I was in a position where I was comfortable moving every 2-3 years. And not everybody wants to do that. And I get it. It's a pain in the ass. It's like a second job. Yeah. So when you talk about these 2024 stuff on Instagram, like you got to have your regular job and then you got to have a side hustle. I always chuckle because like my home was always kind of my little side hustle. I was always working on it, improving it. Over the years, you'd get new furniture, you'd get new artwork, you'd watch. Then you start watching design. I had a subscription to HG. What was the old decor? Not even that. It was the design magazines. Yeah. That would sit on the coffee table. I'd get those magazines every month, and I'd be flipping through like what are the latest trends for 2003 for home decor. That's what it was back in those days, and now it's everywhere. You can get it on Instagram. You can watch YouTube. You can watch, of course. 5 years ago, it was HGTV with all the shows, Flip It, List It or Love It, and all this kind of stuff. So that's what I got interested in. I got interested in design. I learned a lot about homes and renovations. And of course, attending all the building inspections with clients, I started to get a little more savvy. So again, being able to advise clients on this has been fun for me. I love working with clients who want to do what I did.
So I was just going to say, is that you had an advantage being in the business. And getting to know, what buyers are looking for and what updates and renos made sense and what didn't. It kind of ties right into the Homeowner Advisory Club. And what we're doing right now is advising clients on exactly those things.
Absolutely.
Right?
There are always opportunities in every market. I can't tell you how many times over a year, even this year, last year, where I see one sell and be like, oh, like, that was a good one. Somebody got a great deal there. That one had great bones. You could go in there, live in it for 3, 4, 5 years, fix it up a little bit, not have to put a crazy amount of money in, turn around and make a really good, I don't want to say profit, but you're going to increase your equity, right? That's what it's all about.
Well, that's what you mentioned too, is about when you started your first home, how much equity did you have when you did you build up when you sold it? And what are you at now?
Exactly. Well, the gift from mom and dad was like $10,000. I might have had $5,000 or $7,000 of my own money, times that too with my girlfriend at the time. So we had, $20,000-$30,000, which was a lot, a significant amount of down payment compared to what you could do with that today. I get that. Today a lot of our clients, young clients, are needing help from mom and dad just like we did, but on a bigger scale. It's not $10,000. It might be $100,000 to get in the market. I mean, sure. But the ratios, I think, and the ability to improve and move, there you go, a little catchphrase, is still there. So another part of my strategy, and I stick to this today, I will never stay in a house more than 5 years. I would stretch that rule for an awesome house to 7.
Right. And by an awesome house, I think this is another side benefit of it is as you've moved up, increasing equity, you've moved up to bigger and bigger homes, and you've got to live in some really nice homes that probably otherwise you wouldn't have been able to afford if you'd stayed where you were.
For sure. Moving up the property ladder, knowing I was only going to be in them for 3 years, allowed me to maybe buy a little more house than I normally would have, knowing that I'm paying down the mortgage, I'm fixing up and rehabbing the house a little bit, and of course I could have got caught with my pants down if like the interest rates went through the roof. I know that just happened, so that could affect things. The real estate market has a big slump that could have affected things. So I was pretty careful to make sure if we had a lean year or a bad year, I'd be able to stay in the house for an extra year or two, and then hopefully pivot to when the market was at a level where I certainly wouldn't lose. At the worst, I think, I'd break even. I wouldn't lose any money, wouldn't lose my shirt. So I think we advise our clients to be careful in that. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew. But people always ask me, like when I tell them that, it's funny, people's faces, like, what do you mean you only live in a house 5 to 7 years? And so I explain it to them, and I'll explain it to you. Every house that I've ever bought has either been something that I've bought and I've renovated and fixed up, or I've built it from scratch. And home styles, they evolve, right? Just like fashion styles. After about 5 years, and again, this is why I said you could stretch to 7, the styles start to change and the house starts to look more dated. Mm-hmm. So bathroom styles, tile colors, paint colors, kitchens, as we all know, we're watching every year the latest trends. After 5 to 7 years, those things start to change. So it doesn't look newly renovated anymore. Secondly, it suffers from wear and tear. And thirdly, the systems start to need investment. As you get to year 10 and year 15 as a homeowner, and those of you out there that have owned your home for 15, 20 years can attest.
Heat pumps.
Roof. Heat pumps, windows. You're starting to put big money back into the house just to maintain it. And me, as someone who enjoyed the process of buying new properties and taking on new projects, I really did enjoy that. I want to stress that. I really love the challenge of getting my graph paper out and doing floor plans and taking walls out and moving, and how can I improve the flow of this house? Like I got into that. I loved it. But I think if I'd stayed in the house for 10, 15 years, then I was like, oh my God, I got to renovate it again. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to sell it so that to a buyer, it was newly renovated or new. And I think you maximize your sale price when you're selling a house that's that age, that's got up-to-date systems, roof, furnace, heat pump, HVAC, all that stuff. And the inside is de jour. Yep. You're going to maximize your sale price. So for me, and again, I know everyone's different. Some people they want to buy the forever home. They want to stay there 20 years. They hate moving. They don't want anything to do with it. That's fine. But knowing that what I did, I think I increased my equity significantly from the first $10,000, $15,000 I put in to having well over $1 million of equity in my real estate holdings and owning 2 properties.
That was another thing. It's like you started off, moving, principal residence moving, and then there was a point where you were able to hold on to one as an investment property, as a rental. So maybe get into that. Explain
that was part of the climb up the ladder. And that was thanks to my mortgage broker at the time, Eric Seren from RBC, good friend of mine. At some point, my equity was building, and Eric said to me, "Hey, have you thought about keeping some of these properties and turning them into a revenue property, a rental?" And I'm like, "Oh, how does that all work?" So he kind of walked me through it, and it was great. My little bungalow in Beaconsfield South, I lived in that one for nearly 3 years. And then when I moved, I went to the bank, I refinanced it. I was able to then get a nice amount of almost all my equity out of the house. Because what happens when you refinance is the bank then sends an evaluator. They evaluate the house at today's market value, and they'll loan you up to 80% of the appraised value. So I had improved the property and kept it for a few years. So basically all the money I'd invested in there and more, I was able to pull out by refinancing it. And then I was careful to ensure that if I rented it, my rental income would cover the expenses on the property. So I pulled that money out, turned it into a rental property, and I used that money then to buy my next project, buy my next home. And so then I did that a couple of times. But that was certainly not something I did out of the gate. So anyone young out there, I mean, that's something you build to. And you build to that, and then I think it was a great way to really put the wealth generation aspect of real estate to compound that.
Well, that was the exact advice you gave me when we found our current home. That was the exact situation. We'd been in our home for 14 years, had built up enough equity, and we were all ready to sell it. And you said, wait a second, hold on, here's what you can do, because you just done it.
We sat down, we crunched the math,
yeah,
talked to the mortgage broker, rented the house out. It's almost paid off now, right? You're able to get a line of credit against it,
yeah,
that you can touch or not touch, and you now own that asset. It's been a revenue property for you. The tenant's paying down the mortgage, so that's phenomenal. That's a whole other podcast is revenue properties.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what did I look for initially? I looked for homes built in the 60s.
That was it. It was another thing.
I loved 60s construction.
Why?
Well, 60s was grounded plugs generally, so you didn't have to get into doing any major electrical. You might want to change an electric panel, but you didn't have to rewire the house. Whereas 1950s and 40s, the plugs weren't grounded. So for today's standard, you'd have to rewire often, and that was expensive. So 60s construction.
Smaller rooms and closets too in the 50s.
50s, yeah. Small, different layouts, really small closets, lower basements often, smaller rooms. So 60s was, I think, the golden era of construction. And then I think that, also 60s, very solidly built. It was before
a lot of wood floors.
A lot of hardwood, oak floors, solid construction. Building inspectors always loved the 60s homes, and I listened to that. As you got into the 70s and the energy crisis, they started to build cheaper homes. Aluminum wiring, cheaper thin plywood under the roof shingles, and carpet over plywood for the floors, or parquetry came in. Yeah, and then the styles, mansard roof, not as much curb appeal I found, whereas 60s were more classic. So I always liked 60s. 70s kind of stayed away from. 80s got a little bit better. And then construction from the 90s on got better in some instances, not all. Mm-hmm. And now I think there's an opportunity for like homes built in 2000, because we're 2024. They're 24 years old. Right. Some of those homes now are well built in good locations. They have a good size, good flow, good layout. But they're dated. So you could go into something like that and do some cosmetic updates to it. And I think you could do very well on resale in 3-4 years if they're in a good location. That's another one. Location is key.
Okay, so what did you look for in location?
Well, I didn't want to be on a main super busy street. I wanted to be obviously near parks and good schools, like all the key things we look for when we're talking about locations. And my locations got better as I build more equity and was able to buy nicer and bigger houses. I moved, closer down to the lake and in better locations, and eventually got to where I am now, where I was able to build my home in a great street in Baie-d'Urfé now, built from scratch. And our plan is to stay there 5-6 years. We love it. But I think after 5-6 years, I'll get the itch. I'll want to do another project. And so thankfully my wife's okay with that. Yeah. She's on board. And yeah.
So any other advice you give to young buyers out there looking either to get their first property, or maybe now, listening to this, reconsidering what their strategy might be? Yeah,
absolutely. Don't be afraid to put a little bit of work in. I know everybody these days, the Gen Z, want to be an influencer, but I think it's a cool thing to own a piece of real estate, even if it's just a little condo. There's so many great little condos out there you could go in and rehab, and for cheap, like laminate floors, and get a cheap kitchen done, and make it your own, and pay attention to design and decor. See what's happening out there and try and replicate that, and maybe be open to moving up the property ladder. You're not going to get your dream house out of the gate when you're in your 20s or your early 30s, especially with today's prices. So move up.
So why not?
I think
it?
that's the way to do it, is to move up now, even more than ever with where prices are, is to get in the market right away as soon as possible. Because, I mean, prices just tend to keep appreciating. If you got help from mom and dad, great. If not, you got to have a good job. But now with the increase in the ability to buy, some of the new policy changes for first-time home buyers are going to help. Get in the market. Don't be afraid to put a little bit of work in. You can learn everything on YouTube now. You can literally, I mean, don't take on electrical and plumbing. Leave that to the experts. But some of the other stuff, YouTube videos, you can go to YouTube University on how to rehab your house, renovate it, make it look awesome. And people don't underestimate the value of interior design and decor. It doesn't have to be major renovations. Just making a house show really well with furniture. And again, you can get knockoff furniture on Amazon that looks like Pottery Barn these days. Like, there's cool stuff out there if you just dive into it and get into it. And don't be afraid to move every few years and climb the property ladder. But you got to be able to find a good deal when you're buying. And that's where you need professional help and guidance. That's where a good broker is going to find you those deals. And meet with somebody who really understands it. And if someone has done it themselves, then so much the better.
Absolutely. And obviously, to help with all of these aspects of owning a home, updating, improving it, again, we go back to the
Well, it comes back to our philosophy, right?
It goes back to our philosophy.
We're all about that, helping homeowners do this. And whether you stay in your house for 25 or 30 years and you just decide that's fine. And I don't view my house as an investment vehicle. I'm just happy to pay down my mortgage and live there and raise my family. I never want to move. I love my neighbors. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're young and you haven't got, maybe you don't have kids yet, and maybe you've just shacked up with your significant other and you're looking to get into the market and build some equity, I think what I did was really fun, and it was a great way to get ahead.
Great. So for those of you watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can be updated when new episodes become available. You can also get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, if you're listening in the car or at the gym. We've always got great guests on talking about interesting topics that are of value to homeowners here in the West Island.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to your next one with mortgage specialist Joe Valenti. That one's going to be cool. So tune in.
That will be very cool. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.